So welcome again. It's been nice to have a little bit of an introductory conversation with all of you. It's terrific that you're able to spend the time together, and it's a real privilege and honor for me to be with you today. We will, I think, like last week, the time seemed to go really quickly, at least for me, it appeared that way. And I think that was because you were so engaged, you had many ideas, and I think today's seminar will similarly have some really provocative, interesting, and hopefully very practical opportunities for you to think through our teaching and learning today. And so let me share my screen as I have some prompts prepared for on a PowerPoint. All right, and great. So I'm hoping that everyone can see this, and terrific. So this is our second seminar. Last week we focused on kind of broadly some of the challenges and opportunities that we're facing with online instruction, but not so much how to do online instruction as it is reflecting together on some of the fundamentals of good teaching and learning design that can be applied online, offline, asynchronous, synchronous, in ways that, as I've been engaged in thinking through the process myself, in ways that I can continue and we can continue to improve our understanding about the learning process, learning science, how students engage that process, and how we as instructors and teachers respond to the needs of students, both as we think about their cognitive needs as well as their social needs. So today's session, because this topic came up several times in last week's seminar, we're going to think a little more substantively and deeply, actually, about one aspect of good learning design, which is how to design, implement, and strategize for the ways in which we get feedback from and give feedback to students. And so feedback is the sort of short concept for a more technical idea of teaching and learning, which is evaluation and assessment. And we all do this in a variety of ways. We've been taught it, how to do evaluation and assessment in our various research design methodologies in our own disciplines from our own work. But we're going to think about evaluation and assessment again with a greater empathy for students and their experience, and a greater understanding about the learning science that's involved. So evaluation and assessment. So, last week we started in this little boat together. Well, actually, no one's in the boat. So this is, for purposes of kind of having us think about this together, being tossed around in the, in this vast ocean of challenges, we can feel like we're going to become overwhelmed and that the boat will capsize. But I think last week we were able to do a couple of good things to get us out of the storm. One of them is, let's add some people in the boat. So no longer is it a boat on its own, but we're together. And actually the seas look pretty rough in this photo, but we've got many hands together to navigate the boat, to work the rigging, to bring up the sail. And I think this is a terrific analogy, at least for me, that if I wanted to be in a boat in a storm, I'd want to be in a boat in a storm with you all. So we're in it together. But of course, our hope is that we get to this, where we're sitting on the deck, sunning ourselves on this beautiful yacht in calm seas, enjoying whatever your favorite juice or beverage is. That's where we want to go. To help us navigate today's conversation, I want to draw your attention to a couple of features that will help us to do a good job of providing feedback about our conversations, and also to provide you with some examples of the ways in which we can use current technology to gather data with regard to doing evaluation assessment and giving and receiving good feedback from our students. And there are a couple of great features. So one of them is the shared Google document. And hopefully all of you, or at least most of you, have access to that Google document. The great feature about the Google document is that it's in a shared mode, and everyone, and I encourage everyone, either simultaneous to the session today or after our seminar, that you would add notes and ideas and thoughts, answering the specific questions that are prompted on the Google Doc, or adding some of your, something that you want to say or think we should know, that would provide us with a better understanding about how we move forward. So please use the shared Google document. Again, I'm going to ask you to use that Google document during your small group sessions to get an idea about some of the concepts that you're talking with one another about. And then I want to share some Zoom features that we didn't use last week, but I find really helpful in my classes. Of course, we used the breakout rooms last week. We'll continue with the breakout rooms this week. Anytime during our session, whether we're in breakout rooms or we're together, you can provide me with feedback, and you can provide ideas or notes or reflections or questions to each other using the chat feature. And the chat feature is on your toolbar, in which you just click on the chat feature and it opens up on the right-hand side of your screen, and then you can type in a question. Now, what's interesting about the chat feature is you can send a question or a comment to the entire group, or you can send a question or comment to an individual person in a private chat. But that's one opportunity that I give students, that while I'm talking or others are bringing ideas together, and if a student has an idea and they just need to share it immediately, but they don't want to be rude and break in verbally into the discussion, they can type their questions. So the chat feature is a nice multimodal way of communicating and also receiving immediate feedback about the current session. Another feature I mentioned last week, but we did not demonstrate, is a whiteboard feature. And that is, okay, so we have someone that's joining us. Let me go to this. Okay. And here we go. So, so Professor Eob, he is looking at the chat feature. And if you would just type in something, Professor, in the type message here, and that will go out to everyone. Hi, everyone. So, did everyone see that? All right. And we're getting responses. Nice, nice. Excellent. So that's a nice feature. And look at that, everyone's using it. Perfect. Terrific. Another feature that can also be interactive is a whiteboard. And so I'm going to use the whiteboard in a few minutes. That is a feature that really, technically, it's not complicated, but it does offer another way to get, I think we can use it as a good platform to receive feedback from and with our students. And then the fourth feature that we're going to demonstrate in our session today is a feature called Poll, which is essentially, it's an opportunity, it's a feature that allows you to design quizzes and to take surveys and to provide feedback immediately to students. and you can provide that feedback during the session. You can pre-design the questions on a survey before the session, which I did today, or you can actually create one of these polls during the session if you have some new questions that you want to experiment with. So we're gonna demonstrate that feature as well. All right, so those are some things to think about as we're moving through the seminar, and hopefully I can use each of these features in a seamless manner that allows us to be better engaged. Of course, I want to remind all of us, including myself, what the focus of our seminar today. So there are three learning outcomes, and I like to begin all of my modules or class sessions articulating very explicitly to students and the participants what it is that I have in mind in terms of the learning outcomes for today's session. So these are the three learning outcomes that I hope that we can all benefit from. Terrific. We're going to benefit from one more person being admitted. Great. Professor Naif. Welcome. Welcome. So I hope that we can do three things today as our outcomes. Be able to acknowledge and share with one another some of our best and current practices in learning design that reflect good use of engagement with getting feedback or assessment and evaluation. What are some of our current best practices? Let's be able to identify those and share them with one another and learn from each other's good work. Second, we're going to look at, again, some learning science, research-based ideas that help us reflect on some very practical ways in which we can better design our evaluation and assessment processes. And then third, that from our discussions, you are collectively identifying what I think are the building blocks and structure for a plan moving forward, not just to get out of our current emergency and do as well as we can under the tough circumstances, but let's plan ahead. How can we do better and prepare for future disruptions to our teaching, but also just strong teaching into the future. So we want to celebrate the good practices that we currently use and share those with one another. We want to become informed better by some of the research science around learning that might help us to implement and understand how we can design for ourselves and our students better evaluation and assessment. And then this all together as one conversation will help you as a community at AUM to develop a strategic plan for learning and design moving forward. Those are my goals, and I share them with you so that you can hold them to me. I'd like us to have, let's begin. I'm done talking for a little bit, but I want you to think. Think with me, this is a thought experiment. Think with me and put yourself in a situation in which you have no access to tactile feedback, right? What do I mean by that? Well, that means we have no auditory, visual, right, olfactory, or gustatory feedback. We have no exposure to any of those sensory feedbacks. In other words, imagine yourself to have no way to test an idea, to confirm a hunch or an experiment, right? Or to be able to experiment on some thought that you're playing with, right? In other words, without any sensory feedback, we have no opportunity for trial and error. We just try things. But if we don't receive feedback, oh, that was hot, that was cold, oh, that looks dangerous, oh, that tastes bitter, or that smells strange, I don't think I should eat that, right? If we don't have those kinds of sensory feedbacks, then all we do in our lives is try things, but we don't get the feedback. So think with me, if you were in that situation, what would that mean? What does that mean to us as human beings? So we'll give you a second to think about that. What it means for us as teachers, I'm going to suggest, is that it's impossible to learn.
Yes.
Right? Right?
No improvement too.
Exactly. Exactly. So if we were in this bubble, this non-feedback world, we could not learn. In fact, in order for us, we understand in terms of neuroscience and cognitive science that students, right, they only recognize the need to change something, to change a behavior, an idea, an outcome, a theory, a process of learning, right, if they receive and only after they receive feedback. Now that sounds like a pretty simple statement, and it makes sense, and it's fairly common sense for all of us who are teachers. But we don't, I know myself, I don't always consider with the appropriate attention to what kind of feedback students need in order to modify their ideas and ultimately to learn. So I wanted to learn a little more about, okay, how does the brain work? Like, how do my students' brains work? And of course, you know, we know that it's a very complicated process, right? Neurons and firing and synthesizing huge and vast amounts of sensory data, right? That's how we live our lives. And as we are processing all of this data, right, our brains are processing this data, you know, we're looking for ways to change. And as our brains change in absorbing, processing, synthesizing, firing all of these data exposed neurons, we're learning. The brain is learning. Our brains are learning all the time, right? We can't stop our brains from learning unless we somehow kill the neurons, right? So I wanted to know, all right, where is this happening? I'm a very visual person, so I wanted to know where in the brain is this, all of this learning happening? And it turns out that it happens in a specific area, the anterior cingulate cortex, right? And this is where, in terms
The
of
anterior lobe.
the anterior lobe, the anterior lobe, right? So our brains, as we have evolved, right, that's where we have the specific capacity to learn, right? And we learn by trial and error. And of course, we can't learn through trial and error unless we're absorbing and receiving feedback. So for me, that just sort of like, wow, okay, now I can map this. I can see where it's happening in the brain. And I can imagine when I'm teaching or designing a course or designing a lesson, like I can think about not 50 students in the classroom, but 50 brains with all of these complex neurons firing and synthesizing. And I want to capture that. I want to use the best that they have to offer. All right. But I also wanted to know, all right, how do teaching scientists, how do learning scientists think about the way that the brain operates? And learning scientists tell us feedback's important, but not all feedback is created equal. Some feedback isn't helpful. And in fact, again, this may seem like...
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
The anterior lobe of the cerebral cortex is responsible for learning and memory. So it is responsible for learning and adaptation.
Yes.
The cerebral cortex, the frontal lobe.
The frontal lobe. So
yeah,
this is
expertise, yeah.
Yeah. So Professor Wadi, he sees this, right? He knows this is where it's happening. So you know what we have to do? We got to get in there. We got to get into that frontal lobe. So how do we access that? How do we access that? Well, my proposal is from our learning scientists who suggest it to us, is that we think really thoroughly about what kind of feedback is appropriate and what's the most effective delivery of feedback. What's the right kind of feedback? And the right kind of feedback, it can be all kinds of things. So we're not going to come up with like 3 types of feedback and that's what works. It actually requires us, again, to be empathetic, to be attentive to be to be able to scan what are the needs of the students in the particular situations in which we provide them an effective learning opportunity. Right? So we're both creating the environment, understanding how the brain works, and then matching that with the right kind of feedback. So that's our question today. What's the right kind of feedback? And how can we help one another to come up with some responses? Okay. We're going to get to our first discussion question. I think you're all ready to go and to have some conversation. But before we do that, I am going to provide us with a little fun game here. So I have prepared a poll, and I'm going to launch the poll. This is a survey. As soon as I launch it, you will see the survey on your screen, and I want you to answer the survey questions, okay? Here we go. I'm launching the poll. Does everyone see that poll on your screen? So you select one response for each question, and you just go to that response and click on it. Okay, so we've got a couple of, all right, there we go, great. I can see the number of responses generating.
So Mike,
So they were
you can
just,
create more than one during the lecture, can't you? Can you?
I can.
Yeah.
You can create as many of these
much as you can.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, this is great, fabulous. Yeah.
You can also create, so this is just sort of like a survey, and we can see the percentage of responses for each answer, right?
Is it a Mentimeter or it's a Zoom option?
This
or what?
is part of Zoom. This is a Zoom feature. This is a built-in Zoom feature. Yeah. So
good.
you can also create, you can do something a little more sophisticated. You can actually create quizzes or exam questions in which students have to respond in more complicated ways, and you can grade them. So you can come up with a graded quiz with this poll feature. Okay. So it looks like everybody's at home today. You all feel like most of you are in a good private space, so you can be free of distraction. Was this time and day convenient for the seminar? 80% of you are saying yes. Some of you are saying good day, but the time isn't that convenient. And some of you are reflecting on that this is a difficult time to schedule this meeting. And everyone is saying you're ready to participate, except one lone person who says, I'd rather be on the beach. Well, I'm with you, whoever that is. You can also create, so I made this poll anonymous, so I don't know what the responses are, but you can also create a poll where you know who the individuals are that are responding. So if you were creating a quiz and you wanted to grade them, you would know who they are. Okay. So we're going to end that poll. Thank you for playing that game with me. All right. Now I'm going to share the results. So once you end the poll, which I have, so no one can vote, then I'm going to share the results, and you can see the percentages of responses, right? And how many voted and the percentage for each question. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing the poll. We're going to have, we'll do more at that later. And so, okay. Now we're going to move into our small group sessions. I want to remind you of the question, right? So I'd like you to think about and share with one another in your small groups. We'll have 4 or 5 people in a group. Describe one or more of your most successful learning design practices in evaluation and assessment. How is it that you provide and receive feedback from your students? What methods and approaches do you find to be effective, to be both informative in terms of your own teaching design, but how do you, how do you engage students with appropriate feedback? Okay, so that's what I want us to have an opportunity to think through. Okay, my friends, so I'm going to put you in your groups, and we'll let's see, 5, 6. So we'll make 6 groups, and you'll automatically be randomly placed into small groups. And what do you think? 10 minutes again? All right, we'll start at 10 minutes. And I'm creating the breakout rooms, opening the breakout rooms, and you can now all join your breakout room in 10 minutes discussion. Best practices in evaluation and assessment. Great, here we go. Okay, so we need to assign someone to a room. Oh, that's the double, okay. Assign to, let's see, 4. There you go. So everyone should be assigned. Great. Terrific. Okay. Great. So I hope that was at least an initial opportunity to share some of your best practices, as Professor Hanan was describing. And yeah, some of you in your chat comments, very helpful, are eager to get to practical applications. So let's do that. Let's get to some practical applications. So I'm going to share my screen again with you. Okay, terrific. So discussion 1, you all found that hopefully invigorating and affirming that you are all doing to a variety of degrees, providing great methods of getting and providing feedback. And hopefully you learn something from each other, maybe a new technique or approach that you hadn't thought of before that one of your colleagues uses with great success. So that's one great way to learn. Now, let's keep in mind, and not to lower our good feelings, but I was given the survey results from AUM student experience over the last several weeks with regard to online learning, and they provided us, I think, with some important feedback. So when students were asked about the ways in which their courses and methods are meeting their particular needs, these were the top 5 responses in terms of looking for improvement. So we're not going to talk through each of these. I think it's just a context for us to remind ourselves that the way that we think we're doing well may not always translate equally with our students. So, for example, these outcomes, again, take them for what you think they're helpful. Look at them constructively. Students are generally very positive with the survey about their experience and your approach, but they do have some suggestions, right? And I think each of these 5 suggestions from students points toward an improvement in the way in which we do our evaluation and assessment and how we engage the feedback process. Basically, I think if I could summarize the students' critique of our work is we're not giving them enough feedback. Or as we discovered in our earlier exposure to some of the learning design research, It's not necessarily not enough feedback, but it's the right feedback. So what are some of the right methods of feedback? And I provided you with 2 articles that I have found really helpful. This first article, The Ultimate Guide to Feedback for Educators, it gives us 31 very specific recommendations about how we can do feedback well, right? How we can receive and provide feedback. And I suggest that you look at that article again, if you've already read it through a couple of times, and share it with one another, and pick out a couple and try them out over the course of this next week or next couple of weeks. The second article is an article you might recognize. It was an article I provided for us to read at last week's seminar, but I wanted to reintroduce you to that article again, looking at specific kinds of feedback in the form of formative assessment, right? Which is a gradual scaffolding of providing students with skills that build across one another, but also provide us with incremental understanding about the student learning process in our various courses. But the Ultimate Guide, I think, is a terrific one with very specific recommendations about how to provide the right kinds of feedback. So we're gonna think about that, right, in discussion 1. But before we get to discussion 2, which is for you to think through and share with one another what you may have learned or what you think is exciting from the suggestions in the learning resource articles, I'm going to try another feature of Zoom, which is the whiteboard feature. Okay. Let's see. So the whiteboard feature, this is a really fun one. I have to reshare my screen, click on whiteboard. And so here we have a blank whiteboard, right? And you can do a variety of things. You can draw with it, right? You can provide graphs. We're going to clear that. You can write text. So
Can I ask a question about the whiteboard, please?
yes, yes.
Can we use it as right-hand writing if we want to solve an equation or calculus or in physics, these things?
You can. You can.
If it is a touch screen, of course.
Correct. Yeah. So you can create a variety of formats. You can create, spaces in which you can do graphs, and there you go. So some of you are, and the wonderful feature about this is that you can share, the whiteboard is a shared process. So like someone who's showing their artistic ability here, I don't know who it is, but you can do this together. So if you were to put a graph on the whiteboard and you ask students, okay, let's work with this together, they can do that, right? So the way that I'm going to use the whiteboard is after this next discussion, I'm going to ask you to give me some ideas, and we're going to type in some of your ideas. And the other nice feature of the whiteboard is I can save any iteration of the whiteboard. So we can save this and then send that back to students with notes, or keep it in our file, so that from this lesson, we worked on these graphs, or we solved these problems, or we together we noted a variety of ideas. So this is a really interesting feature. So we'll work with that in a minute. Okay. Now I'm going to share the PowerPoint once again. So here's question number 2. And I'm going to give you another 10, 11, maybe 12 minutes, because I'd really like you to think through with one another, what are some of the practical ways in which we can apply some new, innovative, and more effective methods of gaining and receiving feedback from our students. And I'd like you to refer back to that article, or again, if you have some good techniques that you're working with and you want to share, do that. But I think this is an opportunity for us to engage the research and provide us with some new ways to think through it. So, my friends, we're going back into the into your breakout groups, and away you go. See you in 10 minutes.
I'm not able to join the group.
Okay. Let's see.
There's a problem in joining the groups, I think.
Okay.
Is
Yeah,
it
I
the
think,
record button?
so we can on the chat, I can also, a nice feature of the chat is that I can save the chats and as a document, and then you can also reshare that with your class, or in this instance, we can reshare what you wrote in your chats. So the idea really is whatever method we use, if it's a shared Google document or the chats feature or the whiteboard feature, it's having a record of the conversations that you're having, or in the case of students, that students can go back and reflect on, here are the ideas that we came up with. These were some of the, our own takeaways from a reading or from a question that you prompt students to think about. And then you have a record as well that you can, resend to students as notes. So whatever method you use is sort of irrelevant. It's going through the process of recording how students have summarized ideas and shared those with each other. And then it's a record for you as you're thinking about, okay, are students getting these specific concepts in this particular lesson? How you can revisit an idea that they're still having challenges with. So this is all part of the feedback process, right? Great. So I hope that the readings, as you can revisit them, were constructive for you. And again, I find them to be really helpful as I'm thinking through even my planning for my next class. The ultimate guide feedback is really, really terrific with those 31 specific suggestions. So I'm going to tell you, share with you 3 ideas that I've taken away from that particular article. So in addition to the 31 specific applications to better feedback and effective feedback, there were 27 sort of general concepts about doing good teaching and learning design. The one that I'm thinking about specifically this week is, how can I do better at providing students with formative feedback? So rather than just wait till the end of the semester or mid-semester to take students' exams and give them the grade, I want to design periodic and actually weekly formative feedback. So I understand how it is that students are engaging the material now and where it is that they need more or less help. So that's one idea that I'm working with this week. Another idea out of the 27 is that in the way that I provide students with feedback, rather than tell students, okay, this is right or this is wrong, this is your grade, and that's it, is to provide them with enough detail in which students are thinking about what it is that they did well or not so well, and how it is that they can creatively resolve a problem or readdress a concept. So I call that, at least in this article, mindfulness. So students are thinking about and creatively re-evaluating themselves rather than just getting a grade, which then they just shove off the desk and move to the next thing. So mindfulness, promoting mindfulness in the way in which I provide students with feedback. And one of the ways that I found is really helpful to get students to engage after they've submitted some product of their understanding is to ask them more questions. So not only do I advise students, okay, this concept you didn't get right, but then I ask them, can you think about it in a different way? And so it provides them, again, this idea of being more engaged and mindful about the process. So that's something I'm also working on with my feedback. And last, I'm thinking about this, which is I can give students, you know, paragraphs worth of feedback. But if I don't provide that feedback in a timely manner, students can disregard it. So this is a really difficult, time-sensitive issue, not only time-sensitive in terms of the learning process, but our time is valuable, you know, and this is really time-intensive. This is a time-intensive approach. So when I ask students to complete an assignment by Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm providing them with feedback about that assignment, not next week and not 2 weeks later, but, it doesn't have to be immediate, but it has to be within a window of time in which students are still reflective and attentive to the assignment. So timely feedback is something that I'm also working on. And among the evaluations that I receive from my students at the end of each semester, every one of our courses, automatically students receive an evaluation survey, and each of our courses receives an evaluation that the university, they also review for our, you know, promotion and tenure kinds of decisions. But when I receive feedback from students, if I give them timely feedback, they indicate that as a highly appreciative practice. If I don't give timely feedback, they are critical of that. So timely feedback is also important. Okay, so discussion 3, I had in mind that we would talk about resources, but rather than go into our small group discussions, let's have a broader discussion, right? And in fact, we can open up the discussion for the next several minutes to address any of the concepts or ideas that we were thinking about for today's seminar. So, so I'm going to go back to my gallery mode so I can see everyone. And let's just open it up for a few minutes for some constructive discussion. Ideas that you came up with today that you think were helpful, some questions you have. Let me just open it up. And one of the, and I'll show you another feature of having this kind of full group discussion, is that you can manage it with, you can, okay. There is an icon that you have on your screen at the bottom of the screen, I believe, participants. And if you click on the participants, you have options to raise your hand if you want to talk. There's a little icon with a hand raised. If you click on that, it shows up on our screen and everyone can see that, oh, this person has their hand raised and they want to ask a question or provide a comment. Has everyone seen that?
Yes.
Okay, so there we go. So, so Professor Ayub has raised his hand. So I'm going to acknowledge him, and then you can also, then I can lower your hand, right?
Okay, I'm not sure I know where can I raise my hand? I'm not sure I found that feature.
Okay, can someone help Professor Majda? Where did you
Raise
find it?
hand.
Participants
Where is it?
at the bottom of the page.
Okay, at the bottom, is it to the right, to the left?
To
To the
To the
left.
left. To the left. Right hand.
Oh, okay, clap, where it says clap?
You
No,
can
no.
clap.
No.
No, it's
No.
participants.
It's high.
Thumbs up?
Raise
It's like
hand.
high.
Oh, raise hand, I don't see it. I don't think I have it.
Far left.
Far left?
Yes.
Go down
Far
at the
left.
bottom of the page.
Far left at the bottom? I don't think I have it.
It's the,
I should have it?
Pointer, take the mouse pointer at the bottom of the page.
I am in full screen. Maybe, should I minimize the screen maybe? Maybe it doesn't show on full screen, or it should?
Did you press participants?
No, I didn't. Okay,
Yeah,
I
you
pressed
should.
it. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
at the bottom.
Okay. Yes, I see it. Thank you. Sorry about that.
good.
No problem.
Okay, sorry.
And then as each student raises their hand, you can say, okay, let's, Professor Majda, you first, and then Professor Wadia next, and then Professor Ihab next. And then the host can lower the hand when that student has spoken. So Professor Ihab, you have your hand raised. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, can I just ask what does go slower or go faster mean, please?
That means it's an indicator to the instructor that you need to slow down, go back to that idea.
Great. Yeah. Fabulous.
Yeah.
An excellent feature, by the way.
It is.
Yeah. So we can have fun playing with that, but I'd like to hear some of your ideas. What were some of the ideas or that you came up with?
Actually, the other button, which is reaction, is good as well. Showing the hand or not, or clap.
The reaction, yeah. So you can say, if someone says something that you really appreciate, you can say, clap. Say, hey, that was really good.
After the project.
Yes, right. Yeah. So those are some nice features, and I find students, they're attentive to that. So in this kind of configuration, if everyone talks at one time, it's difficult to hear. So this gives it some order, and you can, as the instructor, coordinate the discussion. Right. Okay. Okay. So you're probably having fun playing with that. Are there any comments, any observations?
Well, I can give a few. Okay.
Please.
Well, the first thing, we need more train the trainer seminars like this one for the faculty members. It's very important to do that in terms of assessment of students and best practices in delivering online lectures. Another thing, we need many such seminars as well for the students on time management, on how to manage their time. Such training seminars should be carried out by the department. Each department should address its own students. Now, we need to subscribe to a good video conferencing platform which is affordable to AUM and can serve the online learning process efficiently, like Zoom, but we need to know the subscription rate, how much will it be for an educational institution. Again, we need all kinds of supporting materials that should be easily accessible to each student, which will help him to understand the course material. It should be in a one resource site, in a one website where they can easily access it. There should be online office hours for the students to engage with their instructors. Each instructor should have office hours so that he or she engages with the students. These are my main ideas for this lecture. Thank you.
Terrific. Any responses to President Ayub's ideas, or do you have your own? Hanan, you have your hand raised.
We can't hear you, Hanan.
Dr. Hanan, mic is off.
Oh, okay, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. I said that with the formative assessment with Google Meet, the only thing we can do is to ask questions and to get answers from students either on chat icon, or if they don't have their mics working, or they can say it using their mics. But still, I think there is also the diagnosis assessment and the summative assessment. So we need, it's not only starting this at the beginning of the semester for the diagnosis and the summative for the final exams. I think inside the classroom, inside the lecture itself, we need the three kinds of assessment to make sure that the goals and the intended goals are met after we finished our class with our students. So maybe if we can have more about more tools to be suggested for the colleagues and for us to be used inside the classroom during the lecture itself. Thank you, Michael.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Professor Hanan. Professor Bassem, your hand is raised.
Just to try it. Thank you.
Okay. You're doing very well.
Thanks.
Okay.
Other observations? Okay, these are terrific. I think, collectively, these are the ideas that were just described resonate with all of us.
Just one idea.
Yeah.
Most of us are very much afraid of cheating and of not carrying out their, to see whether this student has really contributed or not. I think there are a variety of ways where we can detect this. If you have a group teamwork of 4 or 5 students, 2 students, whatever may be the configuration best for the instructor, in that case, there should be very short questions for each of the students. It can be oral, just to ask him or her about the paragraph that she or he claims that he has written. And then you can directly tell whether they are really contributing or not. In that case, I think the grade should not be extreme. We should not really kill the student by giving them 0 if they did not really answer. Well, it should be less than the ones who really contributed. Because sometimes you may have a leader, a very good student who is contributing everything, and the others are satellites and they are feeding on that student. But it should be easy to control that. But then we should be aiming at that we want our students to learn and not to punish them whether they are not doing good or anything of the sort. The aim is to make them learn. That's the aim in all this process.
Yeah, the question and the issue about integrity in students' performance, even if it's not blatant cheating, students are often unclear about what it is that they're being evaluated on, and there is ambiguity, certainly when students are in group configurations. Well, I use 2 techniques that are effective, whether it's online or in person. 2 techniques. One, with regard to plagiarism, there is free software that you can run a student's document through, scan it through the software, and it will
We have it
identify.
available. We have it available. It is online and they can use it.
Yes, so that really works quite well. And then again, you have to make your own decision about, okay, how do you address that, and do you help students formatively understand what they did inappropriately or not? Plagiarism is a tricky, it's a tricky issue. The other is the group work. So one of the ways that I learn about a student's, individual participation in a group is that at the end of a group project, I have a rubric, an evaluation that I require each individual student to assess their participation in the group, and then give an assessment about each of the other members of the group, how they contributed. And I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share with you that rubric. But students are very honest, and it's not, and they're usually really hard. They critique themselves. So they'll give themselves lower marks than their colleagues in the group that, so I have them assess time management, leadership, cooperation, contribution to the task, and they have to give a Likert scale, and then they can write some notes about how the group
If you can
worked.
share these things, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's just something.
Group.
Just something that I created myself. So I'll send you that document.
Thank
but
you.
I find that students are very responsive to that, and they also appreciate that you're being attentive, that I'm being attentive, that I care about how the group worked and if everyone equitably contributed or not. So, and then I take that into consideration when I give the students their final grade. Good. Well, you know what? We are coming to the close of our seminar. So I want to give some last thoughts, but also give you one more opportunity to give me some feedback, right? So I know last week I mentioned this book to you. In chapter 5 of this book, this question about feedback is in detail addressed, and specific strategies to approach feedback are provided that are also informed by the learning science. And so I'm going to read one small passage from chapter 5 of Small Teaching Online. Models of feedback. Being available for our students and providing timely feedback to support their learning progress does not have to be an overwhelming time drain. If you're teaching a traditional in-person class, you will likely spend anywhere from a few to several hours in the classroom and engaging with class-related activities each week. The models presented here help you spend a comparable amount of time effectively, strategically distributed throughout each week in order to powerfully impact student learning and success. So what I take away from the online feedback is that our feedback online has to be timely and it has to be effective, right? And there are models addressed in this book as well as in the articles that we read today for today's seminar that I think can be immediately applicable. So I think we hopefully walk away from today's session with some tools. I hope that I also provided you with some modeling about evaluation and assessment with that initial poll that I provided you with, just to get a sense of, sometimes it's nice to provide something fun and engaging at the beginning of class that it's not stressful, but it gets students engaged, like they have to answer some questions and you get some feedback. I think that's a nice technique to get students sort of comfortable in the classroom setting, online in particular. Establishing a consistent pattern of your feedback, which is also a consistent pattern in the way in which we're teaching the class. And I find that this is really important online. If students are prepared, that they know sort of what your pattern of how you're going to teach that day, then they can not guess at what's going to happen, but really be involved in the concepts that you're addressing in that session. And hopefully this seminar patterned the process that I used in last week's seminar so that you were more comfortable today in the process. The shared notes, I think, is important for our follow-up, whether we use the Zoom whiteboard or something similar to that. We're also recording today's seminar. Majdi Dayat has edited the last seminar, so you should have access to review last week's seminar, and I'll provide him with the recording of today's seminar as well. And then, you know, providing polls and reviews and assessments. So I'm going to use one more time the poll feature here, but I wanted to think about with you some next steps. So our immediate next steps as participants in the seminar as faculty leaders on campus is to, you know, look at any notes that you've collected together. I'll provide the Google Docs again for any common comments that were written in. I will provide a PDF of this PowerPoint so you have access to the ideas that we discussed today. You will have access to the recording of this session, and that will help us to prepare for any additional seminars that we'll engage in. But I think Professor Ayub's, President Ayub's suggestion that, you know, really these seminars are providing you as the faculty leaders with some content and ideas yourself and how you can give support to your faculty, the individuals and faculty in your departments. How can you pass on or suggest ideas? How can you promote some discussion within your own department that might evidence some improvement as we move ahead with our teaching and learning? And perhaps if you all think it's a good idea, if the president consents, we might develop a seminar in the near future that we can share some of these ideas with all of the faculty. But I think the most effective way to share these ideas is you as the faculty leaders, as department chairs, as heads of department, that you bring together your ideas and you present and engage your faculty to think through some of these concepts and to help them to be more effective teachers now and into the future. All right, because I see President Ayub is on. He's almost on the deck of this beautiful yacht, but he's crawling up the side. He knows he's going to get there. I think we can all get there together. And President Ayub, tell us how how's the view from the deck?
The view from the deck is very promising. I think this is in a way really a way out for AUM of being away from Amman. We are away from many of the concentration of the population in Amman. We are in a much less populated area of Jordan. Most of the population is in Amman, and therefore students, if they want to come to us, they will have to think about commuting. Now, if we start having blended learning and having online learning, but state-of-the-art online learning, then we have a good chance of really going at the top of this deck and really leading higher education in Jordan, locally, regionally, and maybe internationally. This will be a very good way for AUM really to prosper further and to really flourish more and more. I want to thank you very much for these excellent two seminars. Definitely, we are looking for a third seminar, but what I will do the way you suggested, each dean will consult his department heads and then, or her department heads, and discuss the best topic. And then in the Dean's Council, we solicit all these topics together and come up with a common factor topic, and then we shall communicate it to you through Majdi. and Majdi will also be following up on the matter in every aspect. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have one more task before we conclude. Is we're going to do again a good feedback and a good example of that. So rather than have you fill out a separate evaluation form for today's session, I'm going to use the poll function one more time. Okay. And so I have a second poll, which is an evaluation of today's session. And if you would just take a few minutes on your screen to complete this set of questions, there are only 5 questions, but this will be the evaluation that you'll give me feedback about how you thought today's seminar was helpful and how we can improve. So take a few minutes now to complete the survey on your screen. All right, we're at 50%, over 50% have completed the survey. 70%, we're almost there, 85%. 90%. We want to get to, we just need one more completed survey, and then I think we're at 100%. Oh, 100%. You are so good. You are so good. Okay. So let's share the poll results. Okay. Did the pre-seminar communications, was that helpful? Most of you said yes, moderately, so we'll try to improve. Did this seminar meet the proposed learning outcomes? Most of you felt it did, and some of you felt like it partially did. So we need to improve. I need to improve. Would you benefit from additional seminars? Everyone says yes. Several of you said yes, but it depends on what we're going to talk about. That's fair. Were the first 2 seminars helpful to you as faculty leaders? Most of you said absolutely. Some of you said yes, but you know, maybe we need to address some other issues. And then have the first 2 seminars been helpful to you as a teacher yourself? And everyone said yes to some degree. Most of you said yes. Terrific. So I think I think the seminar seems to be worthwhile. And again, I have room to improve, and we need to be thoughtful about the topics, and that, you know, we're using your time well, and that these are ways that you can practical applications can be applied immediately and into the future. So I thank you for your comments, and I wish you all well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
We'll keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you. You too. Enjoy time with your families.
You too. Thanks.
Very good. President Ayub, do you want to stay on? We can chat for a minute.
Yeah, I'm staying on. I'm staying
Oh, good.
on.
Okay, great. Great. And Majdi is still there.
Yes, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay, terrific. So I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay.
Yes.